Welcome everyone to podcast number 5 from LearnAnalytics.org. And today we have a special guest with us, Derek. He used to work for Uber for the past 5 years as a data manager within the self-vehicle autonomous space. We're glad to have you today, and we'll talk about a lot about your experience. How are you doing, Derek?
I'm doing well. Working at Uber was definitely the most transformative of 5 years of my adult life, for sure. So I'm eager to talk about that and about how I got into the field and maybe some advice I might have for others trying to break in.
Yeah, and you have a pretty unique background, right? Going to Uber. We could chat about that first. Like, did you study in data to begin with, or how did you even come to data to start? Yeah.
So I graduated in 2009 with a degree in economics and business administration. And, to get an econ degree, a BS at least in econ, you do need to take some statistics courses and understand data a little bit, but not very much. Economics is, I think it's fair to call economics a bit of more of a softer science. So I would say that I wasn't really prepared educationally or with my educational background for a role in data. I just kind of was the person willing to do the work and do what other people didn't want to do. So that's sort of my story. To kind of go to the very beginning, I grew up in the Chicagoland area. When I graduated in 2009, I just kind of went back to my hometown because I couldn't find a job at the Bureau of Labor Statistics. I got an interview, but didn't quite work out. And I needed to get a job, so I kind of went back to my hometown, and I got a job actually at a shower door company. So I was that's my journey. I was an office manager at a shower door company, and I did that for 6 years. So I didn't actually start working for Uber until I was 29 or 30. I think 29. And I didn't get into data until I was like 30, 31. So how that happened was, I'm working at a shower door company for 6 years. I realize, hey, I've always been passionate about gaming at the very least, and I've always been super comfortable with computer technology and getting computers to work so I could play games on them. And everyone always told me, you should work in computers, you should be a programmer, et cetera, et cetera. Well, by the time, I'm like getting in my late 20s, I realize I don't know if I have the discipline to learn how to become a programmer, but I can at least try to get into a tech company and work more with computers. So that's what my goal was. And I applied for a contract position through a sort of like permatemp agency because Uber basically needed data entry people. And they needed data entry for training their driverless cars at their driverless car division called Advanced Technologies Group, ATG. They needed people to basically look at images and draw what are called bounding boxes around the pedestrians, the vehicles, basically actors of interest. When you are driving yourself, you notice, even if you don't consciously notice it, you notice where the pedestrians are, you're tracking their movement, you notice where all the other cars are, what their sort of dispositions are. And what this data entry job was meant to do was say, hey, this is a pedestrian, this is a vehicle, this is its heading, this is the, this is the head of the pedestrian, this is the direction of this, that. And to track it a long time and to give that data to other teams to use to train machine learning models to teach the cars
Mm,
how to recognize the world around them.
mm,
So, so yeah, it started out as a data entry position,
mhm,
um, and yeah, so I did that for about 6 weeks,
mhm,
and it was great. I liked the people I was working with. It seemed like every room I was in, I was with the smartest people I had ever been around in my entire life. Each new room was like,
mm.
more geniuses than I'd ever known to that point,
All the geniuses in one room.
There was a lot of really, really smart people, really hardworking people too. That's something
Yeah.
that um, you really just can't discount.
Mm,
All the folks there. At tech companies, you have a lot of Ivy League talent, right?
mhm,
Um,
mhm,
but at this particular company, being one of the first 80 or so employees, everyone who was in there was not only Ivy League or CMU,
mhm,
or Stanford, just elite schools, but they were the people who worked the hardest in the
mhm.
actual fields that they were in.
Yeah.
So they worked like maniacs.
Mm,
And that I think, taught me, because I hadn't really needed a work ethic to that point, but I think that taught me like, oh, some of these people who work here didn't go to the fancy schools.
mhm,
They seem more like me than what I would have pictured a sort of uh, a privileged person. They
mm,
seem more like me, and yet they're still in this role too. So that taught me sort of the value of hard work. Um,
yeah.
but yeah, I did that for about 6 weeks before I began to realize that I didn't want to be a contractor, because they were talking about restricting us from the all hands meetings, and just having this sort of tiered culture, where this class system where I was going to be at the bottom of the totem pole.
Mhm,
So I had up to that point made sure that I was the fastest, the hardest working, I'd volunteered for all the extra duties like making technical documentation, and training people. And I just sort of said like, hey, I need to get hired, um, or I'm gonna find a different job. I love it here. I want to work here, but I also want to be sort of enfranchised. I don't want to be a part of this sort of disenfranchised class
mhm.
here. And within 2 weeks, they had a job offer for me. So
Wow.
I think I think they needed somebody reliable, to train and to make the documentation.
Mhm.
So my timing was good.
Wow, that's
Uh,
great. Yeah, you really made your presence known within two or those 6 weeks, right? Or the yeah, the both on the side of like doing the extra step, right? Doing the
mm.
technical documentation, and then really, I guess, demonstrating that trait that you said, right? That they seem to value a lot, that hard working and that grit and that persistence. Uh,
It's definitely more important at startups, to sort of just work like a maniac, and volunteer for everything. I think as an organization gets more mature, other things become more important. You can't just skate by just being the fastest, most breakiest thing person in the room. But yeah, certainly at a small startup, hustle, it goes a really, really long way.
yeah.
And that same hustle was really what got me into data, because
Mm-hmm.
I saw that as my ladder rung up, because um, our data entry team was growing.
Mm-hmm.
I was one of the first three hires,
Mm-hmm.
but we quickly expanded to having, 20, then 30, then 40. And at the peak of local employees, I think we were up to 60.
Mm-hmm.
And throughout all that, we started building out our capabilities. And one of the capabilities we really needed was to sort of monitor the data entry production,
Mm-hmm.
um, to try to make it as efficient as possible, and to
Mm-hmm.
monitor our quality statistics, because that's what our internal customers were really, really, really interested in, is, um, what did we think our quality And they broke it down by precision and recall. Precision is
Mm.
um, of what is there, what has been done right, and
Mhm.
recall is of what should be there, what is there. So if you have low recall scores, you might be missing labels. Uh,
Mm.
you might be missing some pedestrian or vehicle in an image. If you're missing precision, then you might have labeled all of the vehicles and pedestrians in an image, but the label might be wrong. It might be cutting off the legs or something. It might be an inappropriate size, something like that.
Mm.
So I got into data because we needed to monitor those quality metrics and um, monitor the actual production rates. And we had all of this data that the other teams, like what we call the perception team, which is the team that actually tries to build machine learning models that look at the images and say this, they do image classification mainly,
Mm. Mhm.
and LiDAR classification. We'll get into that later, I'm sure.
Mhm.
But
Mhm.
image classification, meaning this part of this image, you know, has a pedestrian more than likely. A 99% confidence interval has a pedestrian. That's what they'll do. They were really already generating metrics off of the work that we were doing in our label production data entry efforts. And we decided that we could use some of the metrics that they were generating from the tools that we were using to
Mm.
monitor our production, monitor our anticipated quality and all that stuff,
Mm.
build dashboards and report on it. And that's what I got into. We
Mm.
didn't hire a data entry slash data analyst person. That's just an opportunity, an opening that I saw. So
Mhm.
I started using a visualization tool called Kibana, which is part of the Elastic ELK stack.
Mhm.
Elastic company, I think, is a great company. Kibana, I think, is a great visualization tool, and it's continually getting better. But it was kind of, new at the time back in 2015, 2016,
Mhm.
and nobody really knew how to use it. Um, so I just taught myself.
Mhm.
And I started building dashboards and sharing them with people and suggesting paths forward and uh, proposing new metrics to develop that maybe some of the engineers could have streaming from our tools.
Got it.
And yeah, I mean, it just kind of took off from there. I was the one person who really wanted to do it.
Mhm.
We all had access to this Kibana tool.
Mhm.
Everybody and at Uber, at least at ATG, had access for the
Mhm.
most part to anything and everything. Especially in the
Mhm.
beginning, it was very they had democratized the data analysis because the whole company was 90% engineers and
Mhm.
they needed to do their own analysis
Yeah.
because they were full stack, full everything. They
Yeah.
needed to know how to code in any language, to work with image-based detection, lidar-based detection, maybe even radar, maybe even sonar data,
Mhm.
and front end and back end systems. And in order to do the actual science, they needed to also do data analysis. So they had to use the full toolkit, and I was just fortunate enough to have access to one part of that toolkit.